In our previous video, we have seen a holistic version of what RxJS is. Now let's take one step in creating our streams that are observables and subscribe to them. Before starting, we must make one thing very clear, that an observable could be anything. It could be numbers, events, arrays, or JSON objects, and more you'll be hearing the word observable and observer. So please let that sink in your mind. So first off, let's create a blank Angular project and let it be of any name you like. So I like to keep it as ng new my Angular Rx. Okay, so do I need a routing? Yes, and let me go with the so that will create our project. The thing is, we're not going to bother much about the styling and other UI based elements or things like that. Okay, so we will be predominantly looking into console log and watch what will happen when you're doing some operations with the observables. All right, we have the project done, so we need to navigate into our directory, which is my Angular Rx. So from here we will just use code dot, which will open our Visual Studio Code and the code base. I'm gonna just have it like this. Alrighty, and the first thing is, let me open up our terminal, which is the control and the backtick, and here I'm going to create a new component called ng-gc observable example. So this will be our new component. Let me just enlarge this a little bit. So this will be our component that we'll be working on. So our component is ready and it is created, and it is inside app folder, and you have the observable example component that we have created. Let's close this, we don't need it further, and we can open up our app component and just select all, delete everything, and go to the observable example and get this one. That'll do. Now let's open our before that we need to execute our program, our application, which is ng-serve. That'll kickstart our application and it'll run on 4200 port. So let's wait for a bit. If you notice, our project is running on 4200 and the observable example works. I will open up our console here so that we will be having a look at what's happening and all the operations that we are planning to do, things like that. Now we don't need the app component HTML, so we just close that out. We only care about this observable example component because this is where we'll be working more. And yes, so let's first off, let's create a button in our observer, and I will just give it a heading, which is h3, called as what do we call observable example. So that's there, and then a button. So the button will have a btn template reference and it's just a button. Okay, so the text value of the button will be just a button, so there is nothing happening. And let's open up the Typescript class file. In the Typescript class file, we need to do a couple of things. First thing, we need to include a vChild. So at vChild, so the vChild will be, our selector will be a button and then static of false. Now in my previous lecture, you can go and refer in the place where we were discussing about the change detection and ng zone. There I'll be describing about the static false and true. So it totally depends on something to do with change detection mechanism. So in here we are referencing our button, we are referencing our template variable, and then declaring a field in a class called button, and then our type for that button is element ref. All right, so we are basically accessing the button element inside our class file. So the button will be our we can make use of this button inside the class file and listen to it, right? So another thing is, now we need to create we need to get the actual reference, the HTML reference of this button. To do that, you can go inside ng on init and get the reference, but since it's an HTML and it everything renders after view init, we need to first call the implementation like after view init and the lifecycle as ng after view init. Now in there we can create an observable rightly. Okay, so it could be, as we know that the observable could be as simple as clicking a button event, or we can create it by using of observable or from or anything as such. So in this case we are creating an observable using from an event. Okay, so the direct answer is from event. From event is actually a method from RxJS that will return an observable. So if you notice, it returns an observable of some type. The type, maybe it could be event or it could be anything else. Okay, that's totally up to us to decide what the return type will be, but this from event will return an observable. Okay, so this is how we will be creating an observable. Okay, this is just an example. So once I added from event, it automatically imported from event from the RxJS library, as you can see. All right, so the first step is this dot button dot native element. Okay, and click will be our event, right? So now we created a field in a class called button, and then we are raising an observable, but there is nothing happening. We need to work on that aspect. Okay, so first thing is to trigger an event, to trigger an observable, you need to subscribe to that observable. Only then the observable gets triggered. Okay, so that's the first first thing that you should know. This is not a promise. Promise will be eager, but an observable will not be eager, it will be lazy, right? So first thing, we need to create a button observable and observe. Okay, so I created a button observable with a type observable, but if you notice, there is a red squiggly lines which says you need to add a type for that, like so. And also you need to import into the RxJS library. So once you add an observable, it imports automatically from RxJS library, so we can make use of the observable types. And in here, right, if you know the type, you can explicitly mention the type that you're expecting. So for in case of HTTP observable responses, you know what sort of a data object that you'll be getting. So it might be an array of objects, so you can call it as array of any of array or something like that. But in this case, right, since we are going to observe on an event, we can very well go ahead and type it as event. So this is what we are going to listen on. And the next bit is I'm going to assign this field in a class inside, to the button observable. So the from event will be assigned to our observable, and the second piece is we need to have a subscriber to trigger the observable, right? So let's call it as button subscription. It will be of subscription right over there. So as you see, again the subscription is from the RxJS library. So the observable, subscription, and from event, all of them are from the RxJS library. Okay, it's automatically included for you. And this dot button subscription equals this dot button observable. This is where the actual action begins. So when you start to do subscribe, and when you start to listen to the incoming data, so let's just say console.log and data, your event starts listening. Your subscription, your button subscriber, the actual piece is here, starts listening and returns some of the subscription related information or methods. Predominantly it will be unsubscribe that we will be more interested to make use of. But for now, right, let's go ahead and click the button. So if you click the button, you will come to know that we are getting some information about the button click action, and the actual button that you have clicked, all the information will be there. So this is one way of making use of click event or any other event, even on a document click or things like that in the app component. You can, not only in app component, in any component, if you want to observe something, you can have something like this. All right. So this is it. Now you may ask a question, why are we assigning this subscribe method to a separate field in a class called button subscription? It's always better to handle subscription in a separate variables, like a field like this, and also observable like this. So you know what is happening and what sort of observable that you are listening to, and what are all subscriptions that's happening in your application. Trust me, when you're working on a real use case scenario, this will be like, it'll be like tens and 20s. It'll be immense. You can't even imagine. It'll be like this, and you don't know what observable is happening and what subscription is subscribed to, things like that. It'll be like a tangled mess. So it's always do it in this pattern, and it'll be beneficial for you, okay, on the long run. And now coming to the actual beneficial part is, whenever a component is destroyed, right, you need to destroy the observable, the subscription as well. Otherwise, the subscription, when it was listening to your observer, it will keep on listening even after your component is destroyed, which is a very bad design. And another thing is, it leads to a memory leak. So unwanted actions will be taking place even though the component is not there in the first place. So to do that, you can just create on destroy lifecycle and call the ng on destroy here. Like so, our button subscription is getting assigned only in the after init. So during the program execution, at the start, there won't be the button subscription available. So we need to do a simple sanity check like this. Button subscription, if button subscription is there, if there is any value, if it is not null, then we'll be like calling button subscription dot unsubscribe. Oh God. Unsubscribe. Yep. All right, so consider this as the best practice, and it is an absolute must, because already some users have pointed this in my other videos that I am not unsubscribing it, which is really a bad design. So you need to do this. It's a must. Okay. Now let's go one step further and inspect what is a subscribe. And before that, imagine like a observable is like a pipe, and a stream of data goes from one end and it is still flowing, right? And imagine the subscribe is like the other end of the pipe, and it will be listening to all the incoming data, and then it will be flowing to your application, or I mean, just like a faucet, okay, from the main tank to a faucet, how the water is flowing. Imagine like that. It's just an analogy, okay? And if you take a closer look at the subscribe method, I have implemented with just one callback like this data and then just spitting it out. Generally, in majority of the cases, we'll be handling things like this, okay? But an observable can also, we can also use object map like this, like the next, error and complete. We can make use of object map. So what I'm going to do is just copy them, paste it here, comment this code for some time, and then remove this bit. Object map is just a, fancy word. Is nothing but a JSON object, and it will have next and event, which leads to a callback function, event, error. If suppose there is an error in your observable, like for say like if you have any connection got interrupted or things like that, in that case your error handler will get executed. And complete will be console log dot sub completed. Okay, so this is basically the object map that you can pass into your subscription method, and in each object map, these are all the next, error, and complete are called as handles or handlers or notifications. So an observable, right? An observable will send you notification like next on each sequences. And if it encounters error, it'll just send you an error notification and then quits out. And if it is complete, it'll send you a complete notification. Now, the order of execution should be like this. You should declare something, you should assign it something like in this order: next, error, and complete. You should not interchange them. It should be in this order. So you should keep that in mind. And the other thing is, either error or complete will stop the execution. Either your observable will stop by error or by complete. All right. So if everything is successful, everything is smooth, it will stop by complete. And if there is any problem, it will come to an error. But best use case example is API, HTTP API response that you get. Okay. If everything is proper, everything is good, it will go to next, and the next will have the data that you have, and you will make use of data by calling a method, and everything is completed. It will go to the complete handler. Okay, in complete handler, you may notice it doesn't take up any arguments, any arguments for data to consume, because complete doesn't return any argument at all, any data at all. The next and error returns something that we can make use of. All right, and to dig further into this, let's create a dummy observable. Let's say we need to have a dummy observer, right? So let's call it as dummy observable. And this could be any, because we don't know what sort of what sort of data type that we are going to make use. So let's keep it that way for now. And subscriber, which is of subscription. Okay, and we have a dummy observable and subscription. Now we can go straight to ng on init and create an observable for us. So that could be this dot dummy observable equals observable. We are just calling the we are going to instantiate a new observable and assign it to a dummy observable. So as I said, there'll be too many observable words we'll be using in this video. Even it is tiring for me to say observable every time. Okay, so observable of OBS. So OBS is short form of each observable argument that we are going to make use. All right. Now we are going to assign, or assign some values to our observable, so that it will send a sequence of data to our subscription. So that's the first thing. And for that, an observable, right, it will have methods like, as we have seen, next, error, and complete, right? So we're going to use these three to demonstrate like how it works and how it shows up in the as a sequence. So next, let's say blah. I'm gonna just copy everything. Okay, so it'll be like this, and finally bs.error. Somehow something has happened down the line and it got error out. Okay, and let's just number them: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. You notice nothing is showing up here because obviously we are not listening to them. So it should be this dot dummy subscriber equals this dot dummy observable dot subscribe, and yeah, we just need data console.log data. Right, so as soon as I save, you can see things are happening. Blah blah blah, error, got it, right? Good. Now, as I said, it's either it's error or complete, right? So what happens if I keep sending information? Yeah, what happens if I keep sending information even after it's error out? Your information is not sent because it's either error or complete. Okay, so this is just a small demonstration, like what happens in a real world, in your real world application. We are not going to send any. Okay, in your real world application, you got this completed. What happens is, yeah, when the whole of your sequence is completed or the data is completed, right? Anything after that's been sent will not go through. Your observable is already completed. Now we can do a simple test. Let's say we get a object map. So next, and then data and complete, error, complete as an empty set. Okay, completed. Now, right, see, so yeah, so when you do a complete, when you send a complete in the observable, your observer picks it up and it spits out. So you may ask why we need to have a complete. Error is fine, because down the line, if there is an error, you might have you might extend this to a method call and then show up a dialog box saying that there is an error in your application, go look at it. But in complete, it could be, I mean, you can think of various things like, after the subscription is completed, do this or do that. There might be some possible use case scenarios. There will be, I mean, there is a possible use case scenario like setting up your form or things like that. All right, I have commented the piece of code which we have been looking at. Now the next big thing is, what if we create another subscription for our button observer? So for example, we have button subscription. Now let's assume that we have like one or two subscriptions like this. So I've just created that. So let's just go to the yeah, over here. I need to copy them a couple of times, perhaps. Like this is 1, 2, 3. So we have like 3 subscriptions listening to 1 observer. So let's see what happens. That's right. So we are getting like 4 events getting raised, 4 subscriptions that's getting raised. The point to note here is, even if you create multiple subscribers or observers for a single observable, right? It will create a new event listener. So these are all, it just created a new event listener for every subscription that you have created. In definition, the observable is a push-based model. The source does not really care about who or how many subscribers are listening to. So in this case, we have only 1 observable and 3 observers, right? So observable is pushing, basically it's a push-based model, and subscribers are just listening to them, right? It doesn't care like who is listening or what they're going to do with the streams that after you get them. All right. To summarize, we have seen how to create an observable with from event like so, and subscribe to that observable like this, and unsubscribe as part of the best practice like this. Extracted data from the observable using our subscription from the subscriber, and also used object-based map to extract the value, object-based subscription, object-based mapping for our subscriber. Looked into the subscription notifications or handlers like the next, error, and complete. Finally, created another subscribe to demonstrate that an observer is a push-based model, which is this part. In my next lesson, we will explore more into observables with API calls and transform an observable using operators. So that will get really interesting, like how and why we are going to transform the streams into a desirable response that we may like in our application. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for our next video. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.